What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that tell one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be about the X-Men once again. And this one's called the X-Tinction Agenda. This was a huge crossover in the early 1990s for X-Men comics. And the reason why? Because you had the X-Men, X-Factor, and the New Mutants come together to go to war against a country that is trying to get revenge against our heroes. So yes, our heroes have to go to war against a country that actually goes out of their way to enslave mutants to help out their economy. Now, by the end of this crossover, we realized that our heroes had gone through a lot. They lost team members in different kinds of ways. But with that being said, I do hope you enjoy this full story video, all 9 chapters in one big video. I do hope you enjoy. What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are finally here, guys. We are finally going to dive into the X-Tinction Agenda. And really, it's only been a week since we had covered Days of Future Present. The last crossover, we talked about the X-Men on my channel. But now it's time for the next X-Men crossover. Now, when it comes to the X-Tinction Agenda, you got X-Factor, you got the New Mutants, you got the X-Men. They're all here again for another massive crossover. Now, here's the thing. This entire story arc is about our heroes going up against the country known as Genosha. Now, we have actually talked about Genosha in the earlier parts of our coverage over the X-Men. Now, when it comes to Genosha, it's this small country in Africa, the small island in Africa, where they advertise the idea that they are a perfect country, that if you go there, you don't want to leave because how great it is to be in that country. But in reality, if you are a mutant and you go over there, you are automatically going to be turned into a slave to help build up their economy. Now, the rest of the world, they had no idea that Genosha was doing that. But the X-Men found out because some of their own team members were actually taken over to Genosha, and the rest of the team had to go save them. But also they freed some of the slaves in the country. Now, the slaves they freed, it was a very small number. But for Genosha, it's still a problem. And so to them, they called that an attack against their country. The X-Men had attacked their country, even though what they are doing is technically wrong. And so right now, it's Genosha saying, we are coming after the X-Men for what they did to our country. Now, when it comes to the American government, they're going to get involved, but I'm going to save that for later on in this video. First, I want to focus on the X-Men. Now, the opening pages of this book does remind us that around this time in Marvel Comics, Storm was actually a child again. She was de-aged back into a child, thanks to, well, a character known as the Nanny. Now, when it comes to the Nanny, she is this very interesting character where she had this belief where she had to go out of her way to help protect other people. Now, at first, it was children, but then down the road, it was young adults. Now, when it came to Storm, she realized that Storm had too much willpower to allow her to take over her mind. And so you had the Nanny turn Storm back into a child again. And so after doing that, she was hoping to take over the mind of Storm. But unfortunately, her plan did not work out. Now, we see Storm in the Danger Room with Jean Grey. And the reason why? Because the X-Men and the New Mutants are trying to figure out where Storm is at right now when it comes to her powers. Because yes, even though she has been de-aged into a child, she still has the mindset of a grown woman. But her powers are now brought back down to the point where she would first receive her powers as a teenager. And so they're trying to see how strong she was back then when she had first received her powers. Now, in the Danger Room, this is also her and Jean Grey rebuilding their connection once again. Because before Jean Grey was supposedly the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix, Storm and Jean were very close. But even after Jean came back to life, it took a very long time for these two characters to sit down with one another and rebuild their bond with one another. But right now, you have the two being able to see where is Storm actually at when it comes to her powers, while you have Forge, Banshee, and also Stevie Hunter kind of seeing where else Storm could possibly go with her powers. Now, something else I do want to talk about is the New Mutants. You see, around this time in X-Men comics, they were being led by a character known as Cable. Now, here's the thing. Their base is currently the sub-basement to Charles Xavier's school. And matter of fact, around this time in X-Men comics, the school is no longer around. It got blown up back in X-Men Inferno by Mr. Sinister. But a sub-basement was actually able to stay intact. And the New Mutants, well, they moved in with their new team leader, Cable. And the problem is right now, Storm, Banshee, and Forge, they're X-Men. They're not New Mutants. And it seemed like they're trying to move in and take over the place. And for Cable, that is not okay at all. The X-Men had left by this point. The basement was abandoned. The New Mutants had moved in. It's their place now. And so for Cable, he's very upset about the idea that now he has to share his home with the X-Men again, even though it was his first, and now the Danger Room cannot be used as freely as it was before they arrived. But now I want to jump back over to Jean Grey and Storm, and here is the reason why. So you have the two characters right now having a conversation with one another about the idea that over the years of being X-Men, they both have went on to a point where the world believed that they were dead, but in reality they had survived, or they were just in hiding, but they were able to come back into their lives and pick up where they left off at. And that is really important when it comes to the X-Tinction Agenda. And here is the reason why. So while you have Storm and Jean Grey being able to have a convo with one another about that actual topic, once you have Jean Grey leave, well, you have Storm be confronted by Wolfbane. Now, for Wolfbane, she's very upset with Storm for one particular reason. Fall of the Mutants. Let me explain. So back in that crazy event for the X-Men, you had each X-Men team deal with their own kind of problems. The main X-Men team, they had to deal with the idea of a character known as the Adversary. Now, when it came to the Adversary, he was trying to come into the main Marvel Universe reality, but our heroes were able to give up their lives as a way to keep him out of their reality. But the problem was, though, they did it on live television. And so to the entire world, the X-Men had died that day. But in reality, they were brought back to life by Lady Roma. Now, when it came to the X-Men, they said, you know what? Let's stay dead to the rest of the world. Let's hide in the shadow, because if we do that, it gives us the ability to go after other characters without them knowing we're coming after them. Now, in Fall of the Mutants, for the New Mutants, they had a different problem. They had to deal with the idea of losing one of their own. Cypher. He died in that crossover. And so for Cypher's death, it played a huge role for the New Mutants. And for Wolfbane, that is why she's so upset for, because the X-Men technically never did die and then came back around like nothing ever happened. But for Cypher, he is unable to come back to life. And for her, it's not fair that Jean Grey and the X-Men are able to just come back like nothing ever happened, to continue on with their lives. But someone like Cypher, a young mutant, was unable to live his entire life because he was part of their superhero team and he got killed off by some crazy bad guy. Now it's time for us to get into the good part, where you have the X-Men get attacked by the magistrate. Now remember, the magistrate is really more of the military force for Genosha. And so when they arrive, they come all gun blazing. They're ready to capture Storm, Boom Boom, Wolfbane, Warlock, and Stevie Hunter. The rest of our heroes are currently in the sub-basement. And here's the thing, you have Storm being able to get Stevie Hunter down the hatch that leads into the sub-basement. But then the hatch is sealed shut, and that is a huge problem, because now the rest of our heroes in the sub-basement, they can't leave in the usual way. They now have to go the back way if they want to be able to help their friends out against the magistrate. But the problem is the back way is going to take them a whole lot longer than the usual route. And so on the surface, it's now just Storm, Warlock, Wolfbane, and Boom Boom going up against the magistrate. And the thing is, they lose very quickly. Now, when it comes to Storm, she also finds out that one of the soldiers of the magistrate is Havoc. And we have not seen Havoc since the whole Siege Perilous part of the recent X-Men stories that we had covered. Because you have the X-Men go through the Siege Perilous. And usually when it comes to the Siege Perilous, it is able to give you a new life, a new beginning in the world. But the problem is, you may forget about where you came from in your new life. And so when it came to most of the X-Men, we knew what happened to them, but we had no idea what exactly happened to Havoc. And now we know. Apparently his new life was in Genosha, and he began to work for the magistrate and now helping them to bring down his old friends. But he has no idea that he is attacking his old friends. But either way, Storm, Boom Boom, Warlock, and also Wolfbane, they're all captured and taken away. And so as we dive into the second chapter, we now pick up with our heroes who were captured by the magistrate now being prisoners for Genosha. Now, when it comes to Storm, she is going to be put on trial because she was part of the X-Men that went over to Genosha. Now, for Boom Boom and Wolfbane, they should not be on trial at all. And here's the reason why. Because they were not part of the X-Men when the X-Men had went over to Genosha the first time. But because they're mutants, and two, they have ties with Storm, unfortunately, they're also going to be put on trial as well. Now, we also kind of find out that a certain character is not dead. That would be Cameron Hodge. Now, the last time we saw him was back in X-Men Inferno, where he had his head clean cut off by Archangel. But because this man made a deal with the demon known as Nastir, he gained immortality. And so his head had traveled all the way over to Genosha, where he was able to work his way up to a government position. And so it's him right now leading the charge to go after the X-Men. Now, let's not forget, when it comes to Cameron Hodge, he was also the leader of the Right. And the Right, they hated mutants. And this man most definitely hated mutants. He wanted to get rid of them. And so being able to join Genosha to turn mutants into slaves or to possibly kill them was right up his alley. Now, getting back over to the rest of our heroes, when they arrive to the surface level of the school, they see that their teammates have already been taken. Now, for Cable, he is very upset with Storm because now he believes that Storm had purposely sealed the hatch shut, which then cut off their chances to arrive in time to help out their fellow teammates. Now, for Forge, it's kind of like, dude, even though she did do that, she's also gone along with your students. And so now we have to work together if we're going to be able to find her and your students. So stop trying to blame her and try to work with us. Now, you have Stevie tell us and her team that, hey, listen, I called in X Factor. They should be here very soon to help out with this situation. Now, getting back over to Cameron Hodge, I just realized that I did mention that, yes, even though he did gain immortality, this man also was given a new body because, again, Archangel had cut his head off, but without a body, you can't do much with just a head. And so you had Genosha being able to build him a robot body for him to use. Now, when it comes to Cameron Hodge, he also got some big plans for himself down the road, and those plans involve Warlock. Now, when it comes to Storm, Boom Boom, and Wolfbane, they're unable to use their abilities thanks to another mutant that works for Genosha, and that'll be a character known as Wipeout. Now, when it comes to Wipeout, well, he has the ability to wipe out your powers, so that's why our heroes cannot use their abilities to fight against Cameron and to try to get away. Now, there is another character we have to talk about, and that would be David Moreau. Now, when it comes to David, he was the original bad guy from Genosha that the X-Men fought against the last time they were on this island. You see, when it came to David, he was able to build a test for the country. You see, anytime somebody turned 13 years old, they were given this test to see if they had the X gene. If they had the X gene, meaning that they were a mutant, they would basically be brainwashed and turned into a slave for the country. And that was his job for the entire country. Now, the last time the X-Men came here, well, they caused a lot of problems with him. And so, yes, even though he's down to get payback against the X-Men, he's also very upset with Cameron Hodge. And here's why. Because he finds out that Cameron has taken Warlock into his own personal lab. Now, he believes that Warlock is also a mutant like Storm, Boom Boom, and Wolfbane, not knowing that Warlock is not really a mutant. He's an alien. And so you have Cameron saying, listen, Warlock is not a mutant. He will not be a slave for our country. Instead, I'm going to use Warlock for something completely different. Now, when it comes to Warlock, he realized that Cameron and also David are too busy having a conversation to notice that he's going to try to sneak away, which he is able to do. Now, I just realized that I did not mention that Richter is also a prisoner as well, alongside with Storm, Boom Boom, and Wolfbane. Now, when it comes to Richter, there is a lot of bad blood between him and also Cameron Hodge, because Cameron did the man dirty in the early days of X-Factor Comics. He was actually a prisoner of the right. Either way, when it comes to Warlock, once he gets back to the cell, he is able to depower the cell to allow our heroes to escape. But here's the problem though. Warlock used too much energy to depower the cell down, and so unfortunately he no longer has the ability to travel with them, and they have to leave him behind, which honestly he is okay with that idea, because at least they're able to get the heck out of there and to find a way to contact their teams to save the day. And so he says, leaving behind, but hopefully I'll be able to meet back up with you. Now for Wolfbane, this is going to be a problem. Because after a while you have our heroes trying their best to find a way out of this whole building, you then have Wolfbane and Richter split up. Now, by this point, Wolfbane and Richter are actually a couple. She was able to move on from the idea of Cypher's death and find new love, which is Richter. But right now, she's very worried about Warlock. And she says, listen, go ahead and go without me. I'm gonna go back and try to save Warlock, which she does try. Now, when it comes to Cameron Hodge, the reason why he wants Warlock so bad is because Warlock has the ability to give other people the transmode virus. Now, the transmode virus technically turns someone into a techno-organic being. And for Cameron, he wants to be that, because once you become that kind of being, you are really powerful. And so he's trying his best to actually fuse with Warlock to gain the transmode virus. But the problem is, Wolfbane gets involved. She tries her best to save Warlock, but while doing that, something happens to the point where you have Warlock just disappear. But unfortunately for Cameron Hodge, he now lost his chance to be able to fuse with Warlock. And for Wolfbane, even though she tried to save Warlock, she technically did stop him from being able to fuse with Cameron Hodge, but now he disappeared. And so we're left to believe that he's also now dead. He's also gone. And for Wolfbane, that hurts a lot. She lost somebody else that she cared for. Now, when it comes to Genosha, they do make an announcement about the idea that they had killed off Warlock. You see, they're saying that they were able to capture some of the mutants of the X-Men who had committed crimes against their country. Now, when it came to Warlock, he tried to escape, and unfortunately, it led to his death. But the rest of their prisoners are still around, and they show a picture of Wolfbane on live television for the entire world to see. Now, by this point, X-Factor, the rest of X-Men minus 3 characters, and the New Mutants are all there watching TV together, and now they know that Genosha has taken their friends, and now they are prisoners. They also now know that Warlock is dead, and are now wondering what could possibly happen to the rest of their team. Now, as we get into the 3rd chapter, this is where we have the government kind of get involved in this story arc. So when it comes to the president of Genosha, she does go to meet up with Cameron Hodge. And you have Cameron kind of give her a congratulations because she basically showed the world that Genosha is not a weak country. They are a very strong country. And when you try to go against them like a terrorist attack, you pay for those crimes. And so when it comes to Warlock, yes, they did kill him off, but because Warlock does have some ties with the X-Men, it's kind of like, no, Warlock died because his ties with the X-Men, the terrorist group that attacked us many months ago. This is us saying that this is what happens when you try to attack us. And the rest of our prisoners, Storm, Boom Boom, Wolfbane, and Richter, they're also going to be executed. Now, when it comes to David, he also walks into the room and he is very upset because right now he looks like a fool. Really not just him, but the entire country, because technically the other prisoners had escaped, and right now they have the ability of getting out. And if they do get out, it could bring more problems for this country. Now, for the president, she tells them, listen, we have to work with Cameron Hodge here because he has the ability to give us what we want. Now, we have no idea what she is talking about, but we can tell it's something very important. So even though Cameron right now is completely insane, they have to work with him. Now, when it comes to the rest of our heroes like X-Factor, the New Mutants, and also the X-Men, they're heading over to the White House to talk to Val Cooper. Now, Val Cooper, she is in charge of the superhuman affairs for the country. But right now, it's Cyclops and the rest of his team right now wondering what to do here, because why would Genosha cause an international incident like this? And also, what would happen for our heroes if they get involved? Because technically right now, this is between 2 countries, America and Genosha. But America cannot get involved for a very special reason, and that would be money. Let me explain. So when it comes to America, they owe Genosha a lot of money. And I'm talking like possibly millions or billions of dollars. And so Val Cooper, she said, we cannot get involved because technically we are in debt with that country. If we get involved, it could cause a whole lot more problems with us and other countries down the road. And so for America, really Val Cooper, she's saying, listen, we're going to give you the ability to go over to Genosha to get your teammates back, but we are unofficially helping you out. But in reality, we are helping you out by giving you a ton of information that could possibly help you once you do arrive over in Genosha. But like I said, you cannot say that you have the backing of America because technically you don't. but in reality you do, because what they are doing right now is completely wrong. Yes, you may be mutants, but you're still looked as American citizens. And so when they went out of their way to kidnap those heroes, they kidnapped fellow Americans. And that is a huge problem. So here's all this info, and hopefully you were able to use it to find a way to save your friends, but to also bring down Genosha. Now, once you have our heroes arrive to Genosha, well, that is when they are attacked by the magistrate. Now, for our heroes, Cameron Hodge knew that they were coming because, again, he knew that sooner or later they would come to save their fellow teammates. But his main goal is to take out the mutant race, but his main goal is to go after Archangel, because Archangel had cut off his head back in X-Men Inferno. Now, when our heroes arrive on Genosha, they are attacked by the magistrate that's being led by Havoc. Now, Havoc, he's the first one to attack our heroes. Really, he attacks Cyclops. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, he's kind of like, that blast should have done some damage to me. But unfortunately, I am okay. Not unfortunately, really, fortunately, I am okay. But the thing is, my clothes are completely ruined. Now, for Cyclops, he turns around and blasts Havoc right back. Now, at first, he has no idea that he's fighting against Havoc. But after a while, he realized, if my powers are not working on this person and his powers are not working on me, that means it's my own brother. And of course, he was right. It's Havoc. And you have the two guys fighting against each other. Now, Cyclops has no idea that when it came to the X-Men, they had walked through the Siege Perilous. And like I said earlier, the Siege Perilous has the ability to give you a new life, a new beginning. But sometimes you may forget about your past life. And so for Havoc, he has forgotten about his past life. He has no idea who he is or the rest of the people around him. He believes that he's actually a citizen of Genosha, that he's actually part of their country. And so he goes up against Cyclops. But once you have Scott being able to say a few words to Alex, he begins to remember. But the problem is, his new life, his new idea of life is fighting against his old life. And so unfortunately, he has to retreat. And he says, hey, get me the heck out of there. And him and his entire army just disappears. But to leave us on a cliffhanger, we're left to wonder what's going to happen to all our different heroes. Cyclops just found out that his brother is helping out Genosha. Wolfbane is now a prisoner again. Warlock is now possibly dead. Richter, Storm, and the rest of them are trying their best to get out of the Citadel. And Cameron Hodge, he is not done yet with our heroes. But in our next video, we're going to have 3 more characters arrive into this huge crossover. That will be Wolverine, Psylocke, and also Jubilee. But this is What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the X-Tinction Agenda. And guys, it gets even crazier because now we actually pick up with Wolverine and Psylocke and also Jubilee getting involved in this event as well. Also, we're going to see Cameron Hodge being able to take down Cable and a few other members of the X-Men, X-Factor, and the New Mutants. And also, there's gonna be some drama between Wolverine and Jean Grey, which could possibly make Cyclops a very angry man. And so getting into today's video, we do pick up with Uncanny X-Men number 271, where we actually pick up with Richter and also Boom Boom on the run. Because remember, they were able to get away from Cameron Hodge, but unfortunately, they had to split away from, well, Storm and also Wolfbane. And those two characters are currently being held by Cameron Hodge and the magistrate. Now, when it comes to Richter and Boom Boom, they're on the run. They're trying to get away from the magistrate, the police force for Genosha. But luckily for the two young heroes, Wolverine, Jubilee, and Psylocke appeared. Now, you're probably wondering, hey, why can't Richter or Boom Boom use their abilities to help out Wolverine, Jubilee, and also Psylocke? Because remember, back in the first 3 chapters of our coverage over the X-Tinction Agenda, they lost their abilities thanks to another mutant known as Wipeout, who has the ability to cancel your powers out until he feels like turning them back on. And so for Richter and Boom Boom, they're kind of just having to run away to allow Wolverine, Psylocke, and Jubilee take care of the magistrate. Now, once you have our 3 heroes being able to do that, you then have the entire group regroup. Now, when it comes to Psylocke, she does use her abilities to read the minds of Richter and Boom Boom to kind of help her and also Logan know what exactly happened so far when it came to Storm, Wolfbane, Boom Boom, Richter, and Warlock. And so now our other heroes know that Storm and Wolfbane are still being held hostage. Warlock is dead, but Richter and Boom Boom, they were able to get away. Now, when it comes to Logan, he said, listen, you two are gonna stay with Jubilee because 1, you guys no longer have your powers, but 2, she still does, which means she can protect y'all and hopefully get y'all somewhere safe. Psylocke and I, we're gonna go back and get Storm and Wolfbane and find you guys later on. Now, when it comes to Richter and also Boom Boom, they kind of want to go with them. But Logan says, again, you don't have your powers. You can't help us at all. Go with Jubilee, go somewhere safe, and we'll find you guys later. Now, we jump over to David Moreau. Now, when it comes to David, he was the one who had created the entire process where you had Genosha testing out people at the age of 13 to see if they were a mutant or not. Now, if they were a mutant, that means they become a slave in Genosha. But if they are not a mutant, then they are able to continue on with their lives like nothing ever happened. Now, when it comes to David, he's right now having a live debate on live television against Moira Taggart. Now, let's not forget, in the last few story arcs that we had covered, Moira Taggart has been somewhat more aggressive towards other people. Now, in this debate, she is angry like no other. But honestly, she has the right to be angry because she says, how dare you guys kidnap 4 children? Wolfbane, Boom Boom, Richter, Warlock, they are children, and you took them to your country to put them on trial for crimes that they did not commit. Now, for David, he said, but that's the problem though. 1, they are mutants, and 2, they have ties with the X-Men. And that right there is good enough for us. But for Moira, that's not fair because you're now saying that if somebody has a connection with someone else and that person then commits crime, then the original person is also in trouble because they know that person, even though they did not commit the crime at all. And so when it comes to Richter, Boom Boom, Warlock, and also Wolfbane, they're being put on trial for crimes they did not commit at all. That is not fair at all. Yes, for Storm, maybe, but the others is not cool. But either way, for David and Genosha, they're kind of like, and what's your point? Like, we're coming after every single person that may have some kind of connection to the X-Men. And right now, we have 5 of your people: Storm, Richter, Boom Boom, Warlock, and Wolfbane. Now, we see David go to his office. Now, when it comes to David, we also get reminded that this man had a son. His son's name is Philip Moreau. Now, he's still alive, yes, but Philip ran away from Genosha once he found out what his father was doing in the country, turning innocent mutants into slaves. Now, when it came to Philip, the only reason why he had a change of heart is because his girlfriend Jennifer, when they found out that she was a mutant, they were going to turn her into a slave as well. And so you had the X-Men being able to get Philip and Jennifer away from Genosha. Now, while you have David in his office, he's then confronted by Storm. Now, This is Storm going for blood. She's kind of like, how dare you kidnap us? How dare you kill off Warlock? How dare you do almost everything you did to me and the rest of the mutants on this island? Now, when it comes to David, he says, Storm, you don't understand. I'm not your main target. Cameron Hodge should be. And the reason why? Because that man got plans to not just wipe you guys out, but to wipe out all mutants across the world. But the problem is, before you have David being able to tell Storm everything she needs to know, Cameron Hodge walks into the room. Now remember, when it comes to Cameron, he now has this super advanced robotic body because back in X-Men Inferno, Archangel cut off his head, but he was able to survive because he made a deal with a demon. And so because of that, he was able to just stay alive and be given a new robotic body. But this body is so advanced, and also because Storm does not have her powers, that she is easily taken out by him. And so now she has been recaptured by Cameron. But getting back over to Wolverine and also Psylocke, they're trying to reach the Citadel to hopefully save Storm and Wolfbane just in time. But the problem is, you have Psylocke screaming out in pain. And the reason why? Because she now has a connection to Storm's mind. And with that connection, she now knows that Storm is going through a lot of pain. They are beginning the process of turning Storm into a slave. And once Storm becomes a slave, she will not remember anything about her past life. She will be completely brainwashed. Now, the last few pages for this chapter, a lot of stuff happens, but oh my god, it's completely crazy. So you have Wolverine and Psylocke being able to sneak into the Citadel, but then blow their cover when they realize that one of the members of the magistrate is also Havoc, Alex Summers. Now remember, when it came to the X-Men after Rogue had disappeared in the Siege Perilous, the rest of the X-Men, minus Wolverine, had also walked through the Siege Perilous. Now when it comes to the Siege Perilous, it has the ability to give you a new life. Now this new life is not promising saying like, oh, you have a good new life. It could be a bad new life, but also in your new life, you may forget about your past one. And so for Havoc, he arrived in Genosha not remembering anything about his past life. But on top of that, this man truly believes that he came here from Genosha. And so right now, he's working for the magistrate, their police force, their army force. And so when it comes to Wolverine and also Psylocke, he's fighting against them. But also so now is Cameron Hodge and his super advanced robotic body. And really, thanks to his new body, he is able to take down Wolverine and Psylocke. Now, they tried their best to continue on, but unfortunately, they are knocked out by Storm. And we see Storm has gone through the process completely. She has now been officially brainwashed and now a slave for Genosha. Now, we jump into New Mutants number 96, where we actually pick up with Richter, Boom Boom, and Jubilee on the run. Now, when it comes to Genosha, they do make an announcement saying, hey, we were able to grab Wolverine and Psylocke. They're now our prisoners, but the other two prisoners, Boom Boom and Richter, they're still on the run, and we're trying our best to hunt them down. And now that includes Jubilee as well. Now, when it comes to our young heroes, they're trying their best to hide, but to also make it over to where X-Factor, the New Mutants, and the X-Men could be yet. But the problem is they're being followed by the Magistrate, who are now using mutants who have the ability to hunt down other mutants. And matter of fact, you have a few members of the Magistrate being able to find our young heroes. Now, when it comes to our heroes, they are able to take down those few members of the Magistrate, but they were able to call in backup. And so for our young heroes, plans have changed. They can no longer run over to X-Factor to the New Mutants or the X-Men, because right now they are going to be followed by an army of Magistrate. And that could be too much for our other heroes to actually handle at this point in time. But now we have to jump over to X-Factor and the rest of the X-Men and the New Mutants. Now, when it comes to Cyclops and the rest of his crew, they're finding out that Wolverine and Psylocke are now prisoners of Genosha. And so for Cyclops, he's kind of like, great, we got to save them as well. Now, when it comes to Scott Summers, this man always got a plan. Like, this man knows what he has to do to make sure that his team is going to be successful. So he said, hey guys, listen, we are going to split up into 2 teams. If your powers do not make that much noise, you are going to be Team A. Team B is everyone else whose powers do make a lot of noise. And Team A is going to basically set bombs across the Citadel. And hopefully those bombs can bring down the entire building, but also give us the ability to save our friends and other prisoners who are being kept inside that building. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, he told everyone that's the plan. But this man got a secret plan that he plans to bring out later on in this event. Now, I want to jump back over to Cameron Hodge because this man is ticked off about the idea that he has not received any word about what happened to the X-Men, X-Factor, or the New Mutants when they had arrived onto Genosha. The last thing he heard was that he sent Havoc and also the magistrate to go take them down, to capture them, except Havoc came back empty-handed. Why? Because Havoc left the battle. Why? Because he freaked out. Once you have Scott say, hey, what are you doing, Alex? Like, you're my brother, you're a mutant, and you were an X-Men. You're not from Genosha at all. And so for Havoc, he's really thinking about the idea that what Scott said could possibly be true. Now, when it comes to Cameron, he finds out that David is about to turn Wolfbane into a slave. Now, like I said earlier, when it comes to a mutant being turned into a slave, they are completely brainwashed. And so for Cameron, he says, listen, before you brainwash her, I want to tell you right now, I want a small part of her to always remember that it was me who basically turned her into this. It was me who was able to capture her and turn her into a slave. Now, for David, he says that is a bad idea because that small part of her could be the end to all of us. Something big could happen down the road because she will remember that it was you who did this to her. Now, we jump back over to Jubilee, Richter, and also Boom Boom. I forgot about her completely. And you have all 3 characters head over to an apartment that is technically empty. No one's there at the moment. So they are able to go through the fridge to get some food to eat. But the problem is the owner of the apartment comes home. And that owner is actually a member of the magistrate. Now, he also has a tracker with him as well. Now, once you have our heroes being able to bring down that member of the magistrate, he then tells Richter that, hey man, listen, Wolfbane is now a slave. And that ticks Richter off a lot. Because remember, Richter and Wolfbane around this time in Marvel Comics had just begun dating one another. And so to find out that the woman he loves is now a slave for Genosha, he wants to rush right back in there to go save her. Now, you have Jubilee and Boom Boom say, have you lost your mind? Like, if you rush in there, most likely you are going to get recaptured. But for Richter, he does not care. He wants to save Wolfbane. He loves her. Now you have Jubilee say, you know what? I'll go with you. And so does Boom Boom. But also the mutant that was used earlier as a tracker. It kind of shows that he's now beginning the process of moving away from his programming that David gave him earlier. Now, I want to get back over to Cable, and the reason why, because his team had arrived at the Citadel, but their main goal is to place bombs across the entire building to bring it down. Now, when it comes to Cable's team, it's Cable, Gambit, Forge, Jean Grey, and Sunspot. But here's the thing, while you have our heroes trying to do that, they get caught by the magistrate. Now, while you have our heroes fighting against the magistrate, Richter, Jubilee, and also Boom Boom arrived as well. Now for Jubilee, she wants to jump into the battle, but you have Richter say, don't do that, because there is another mutant out there known as Wipeout, and he has the ability to wipe out your powers. So if you go out there, you're going to end up powerless along with them. And matter of fact, right when he says that, bam, there goes our heroes' powers. Cable, powerless. Jean Grey, powerless. Forge, powerless. Sunspot, powerless. They're all completely powerless. And so for Jubilee, she realized what Richter said is actually true. Except at the end of this chapter, we see that Wolfbane is a slave. And you have the rest of her friends also realize that they now lost Wolfbane as well, that she is a slave. But Cable and his team, without their powers, they're now also prisoners as well for Cameron Hodge. Now, we jump over to X Factor number 61, but in the opening pages of this book, I want to shift our focus over to Jean Grey, and here is the reason why. So, when it comes to Jean Grey, she's having a hard time believing in the idea that Cameron Hodge is actually a bad guy. Now, for me personally, I'm kind of like, why? Because you fought against him multiple times by this point in Marvel Comics. But for her, she still cannot believe in the idea that he is a bad guy. Because in the early days of X Factor Comics, he did work alongside with the team. Except the entire time he was there, he was plotting their downfall because he was a jealous man. He hated Archangel because back in their college days where they were supposedly best friends, Archangel got everything. He had more money. He had the nice cars, the nice clothes, the women. And so for Cameron, he was a very jealous man. But once he found out that Warren was actually a mutant, that was enough for him to hate all mutants across the world. But either way, you do have Cameron go ahead and beat down on all the members of Cable's team. Now, when it comes to our heroes, they're all powerless. But Forge, for some unknown reason, is completely knocked out. And no one knows why he is knocked out. Now, while you have our heroes being transported over to their cells, they see Wolfbane and they realize that she is a slave. Now, they did get word that she was a slave, but they had a hard time believing in the idea that she actually became a slave. But now they see her, they now know it's the actual truth. Now for Cable, he hates the idea of seeing her as a slave because, again, for Cable, he is now the teacher of the New Mutants. He is trying his best to protect them. And so right now, he feels like he failed when it came to protecting her. And so he tries to go after Cameron Hodge. Now, at first, it does look like maybe he might be able to do something. But again, Cameron's body is just so advanced that he was able to bring Cable back down once again and continue to take our heroes to their new cells. Now, I want to jump over to Cyclops, and here is the reason why. So when it comes to Cyclops, like I said earlier, this man got plans on plans on plans. So this man knew that sooner or later, Cable and his team would get captured. But he also knew that their minds could be read by Cameron Hodge using other mutants who have psychic abilities. And so for Cyclops, he now knows that him and his team, they have to leave. But they are going to leave a nice surprise for the small force of magistrate coming here to look for them. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, he also tells us that he had a different plan in mind, but no one else knew this plan except him and Forge. And apparently right now, Forge is faking the idea of being knocked out as part of their plan. Now, when it comes to Cameron Hodge, this man got plans as well to go after Cyclops. And really, he knows how to attack Cyclops by using Jean Grey, because everyone knows that Cyclops and Jean Grey, that they are lovers. They are a couple. But Jean Grey has another lover, and that would be Wolverine. And so, when you have Jean Grey arrive into her new cell, well, Logan is there as well. Now, something else I should mention is that when it comes to Logan around this time in Marvel Comics, well, his healing factor wasn't as strong as it is now in modern day comics. So for Logan, this man has gone through a lot, but unfortunately, he has not been given the time to properly heal like he needs. And so unfortunately, this man is still severely injured. And so when Jean Grey finds him, she's kind of like, oh my God, this man is literally on the verge of death. But in the short period of time with Jean Grey and Logan being in the same room, they are able to pick up where they left off at to kind of show that they still have strong feelings for one another, and they actually kiss one another. Now, while they're kissing, Cameron Hodge is watching, and he does plan on using this as a way to attack Cyclops. Now, for Cameron Hodge, he still believes in the idea that sooner or later he should be able to capture every single member of the X-Men, X-Factor, and the New Mutants, because right now a small army of the Magistrate is about to hit the base that Cyclops' team was using. Here's the thing though, when they arrive at that base, the base gets blown up. Now, at first, we're left to believe that it was the Magistrate who had blew up the base to try to kill off Cyclops and his team, but something else actually happened. Because while you have Cameron Hodge talking to the president of Genosha and also David Moreau, well, that is when you have Archangel, Cannonball, and Banshee arrive. Now, this is only 3 members of Cyclops' team. The rest of his team is somewhere else right now in the Citadel. Now, when it comes to Archangel, he is very surprised to see Cameron because, again, back in X-Men Inferno, it was Archangel who had killed off Cameron Hodge. He cut the man's head off. But as we all know, he made a deal with a demon. And so he was able to have immortality. And Genosha gave him a brand new body. And so now he's here again, being able to fight against Archangel. And unfortunately for our heroes, even though their main goal was to cause a distraction long enough to allow Cyclops, Iceman, and Beast to pull off Cyclops' secret plan, they get captured by Cameron Hodge and Genosha. And really, the ending of this chapter is a perfect cliffhanger for today's video, because when it comes to Cyclops and Iceman, they're right now pretending to be mutants who are slaves to Genosha. And right now, they are transporting another mutant over to a different facility, except the mutant they're currently transporting is actually Beast, who's pretending to be unconscious. But the problem is they run into some guards who want to make sure that everything is okay. And honestly, their cover gets completely blown. Now, as soon as their cover gets blown, well, that is when the trapdoors begin to come down from the roof, or the ceiling, sorry. And so when the trapdoors come down, they cut off Beast and Iceman from Cyclops. And so now it's Cyclops on his own, except when he turns around, he's then confronted by Havoc. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, he tries again to convince his brother that they are actually brothers, that Alex is an X-Men, that Alex is actually a mutant that's not from Genosha. And really, when it comes to Cyclops, he's actually able to have Alex remember everything from his past life. But the problem is, that's when Cameron Hodge walks into the room. Now, when it comes to Alex, he knows if Cameron figures out that Alex does remember everything, then Cameron is going to take out both Scott and Alex. And so you have Havoc say, you know what? Let me go ahead and continue to pretend that I have no idea what Scott is talking about and take Scott out to protect him, but to also protect me. But down the road, I'll find a way to free my friends and family. And this is where we're going to end today's comic book video, because now Cyclops is technically a prisoner. And we have no idea if that was part of his plan. But either way, this is where we are going to What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to really wrap up our coverage over the X-Tinction Agenda. And now we pick up with the last 3 chapters of this crossover. Now, before we actually dive into this crossover, I kind of want to do a quick rundown of why we have this 9-part crossover in X-Men comics. You see, a while back in an earlier story arc in Uncanny X-Men, you had the X-Men had a few members of their team become prisoners in Genosha. Now, when it came to Genosha, it was a small country in Africa, a small island near Africa, where they tried to paint this picture that they were the perfect country, that it was paradise there. If you go there, you do not want to leave at all. But in reality, if you were a mutant, you were a slave, and they used your abilities as a way to build up their economy. And that was the big thing about Genosha. Now, when it came to the X-Men, they were able to save a few of their team members who were prisoners in that country, but also save other prisoners as well. Not all of them, but a few of them. Now, that was a while back, but here's the thing though. You see, there was another character out there known as Cameron Hodge. Now, the last time we saw Cameron was back in X-Men Inferno, where you actually had Archangel be able to cut his head off. Now, when it came to Cameron, he made a deal with a demon, and that demon gave him immortality. So even though his head was cut off, his head just traveled across the world over to Genosha. Now, once it had arrived there, you then had Genosha give him a robotic body so that he'll have the ability to move around. Now, both parties came together and said, you know what? Let's get payback against the people who did us wrong. And so for Genosha, it was the X-Men. They're saying right now to the rest of the world that the X-Men had attacked them in that previous story arc, even though they had technically kidnapped the X-Men and tried to force the X-Men to be slaves in their country. And so this is Genosha saying, what we're doing right now is trying to get payback for what the X-Men have done to us. And for Cameron, he is down with the idea of hurting the mutant race, especially the X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants, because Cameron had a group known as the Right. And when it came to the Right, their main goal was to get rid of the mutant race. And so for Cameron, this goes right up his alley. One, to get rid of the X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants, but then after that, begin the process of going after other mutants around the world. Now, the first chapter that we are going to talk about is going to be Uncanny X-Men number 272. Now, in the opening pages of this chapter, we see our heroes right now being put on trial for crimes that they had supposedly committed against Genosha. Now, here's the thing. Most of our heroes who are here right now being put on trial were not there in the original story arc where you had the X-Men arrived in Genosha to save their own. Most of them are right now being put on trial because in the earlier parts of this crossover, they had attacked Genosha to get their friends back. Either way, they're all being put on trial for the crimes that they had committed. Now, here's the thing, our heroes right now are powerless as well, thanks to another mutant known as Wipeout, who, well, has the ability to wipe out your powers. Now, when it comes to our heroes, they get very upset when they see Storm walk into the room, because by this point, Storm and another character known as Wolverine, they have been turned into slaves. And so for Storm, she was assigned to protect the judge while the trial goes on. Now, when it comes to the judge and also Genosha, they're giving our heroes a choice. 2 choices. 1, become slaves and actually work for the government or work for our country, or 2, be killed off. Like, those are your two choices. If I was you guys, I would choose the option of being slaves because at least you'll be alive. Now, when it comes to our heroes, we already know they are not going to choose the idea of becoming slaves for these evil people. Now, for Logan, he does get very upset when he sees Storm as a slave because in the earlier parts of the X-Tinction Agenda, well, he came here with Psylocke hoping to save her and Wolfbane. But the problem was he failed. And so because he failed, he hates the idea of seeing her as a slave. And he tries to attack the judge. Now, without his healing factor, unfortunately, he can't do much when it comes to fighting against the magistrate to get to the judge. And so he is quickly taken down by a few guards and also Storm as well. But you have the judge say, you know what, to make sure there's not going to be another outburst, hand these guys over to Karen Hodge because they all decided to be killed off because they said, no, we will not become slaves for you people. Now, by the time our heroes arrive over to Cameron Hodge, you didn't have Cable and Gambit try their best to take down Cameron, but to also free their fellow friends. But here's the problem. One, Gambit and Cable are powerless. But two, when it comes to Cameron and his new robotic body, it has so many different kinds of abilities that Cable and Gambit are unable to overcome all those different kinds of abilities. Like, for example, he is able to phase through solid objects. He has a healing factor, and the list goes on. And so for Cable and Gambit, they are once again recaptured and brought back with the rest of the group. Now, when it comes to Cameron, like I said earlier, when it comes to our heroes, they had decided to go ahead and die rather than be slaves for Genosha. But that's the problem though. For Cameron, he's now looking at our heroes as toys to play with. And so yes, they're going to die, but he is going to take his time. Now, before he's able to start, we have to remember that Havoc is also working for Genosha, but for a completely different reason. You see, when it came to the X-Men in an earlier story arc, they had to walk through something called the Siege Perilous, which had the ability to give the X-Men new lives across the world. Now, sometimes that new life can be great, and sometimes it could be horrible, but also sometimes you may remember everything from your past life, or you may forget everything from your past life. And so when it came to Havoc, when he walked through the Siege Perilous, he arrived here in Genosha, but not remembering anything from his past life. Now, by this point in our crossover, he does remember everything, but right now he is pretending that he has no idea that he was an X-Men, that he is the brother to Cyclops, because right now he is waiting for the right time to free his fellow teammates. Now, when it comes to Psylocke, she says, you know what? I changed my mind. I hate the idea of being tortured. I hate the idea of seeing my friends being tortured. I'd rather be a slave than be killed off. And so you have Cameron tell Havoc, okay, fine, take her over to David to have him change her into a slave because she agreed to become one, and they leave. Now, after you have Havoc and Psylocke leave the room, you have Cameron say, you know what, it's now time for me to continue to play with my toys. And so he turns back over and grabs Archangel and Wolverine, because this man knows that these two characters do not like each other at all. And the reason why? Because of Jean Grey. You see, we already knew that Cyclops and Jean Grey were together. We already knew that Logan also liked Jean Grey, but so did Archangel since the 1960s. And really, anytime Jean Grey is single, that man tries his best to get with her, but always failed. And so in the 70s, when he found out that Logan had a crush on Jean Grey, oh man, the hatred was on. Really, also because when it came to Logan, he was very rude towards Archangel as well. But either way, you have Cameron being able to have the two characters fight against each other. Now, when it comes to Archangel, we have to remember that by this point, his wings, they have a mind of their own, actually. And so when it comes to Archangel, because right now he's technically powerless, he no longer has control of his wings. And so his wings begin to attack Wolverine. And for Logan, he has to protect himself. And so yes, you do have the two characters fighting against one another. Now, by this point in our coverage, we have to remember that Richter and Jubilee and also Boom Boom are no longer prisoners of Genosha. Really, Jubilee never was. And when it came to Richter and Boom Boom, they were able to escape earlier. And really, when it came to the rest of the heroes being captured, they realized they had no choice but to go ahead and back away. Because again, if they had stayed, they would also be prisoners as well. Now, when it comes to our younger heroes, they see David Moreau breaking into a different part of the Citadel. Now, remember, when it comes to David, he was the guy who had created the process that turned mutants into slaves. When someone turned 13 years old in Genosha, there's a test given to you to prove if you are a mutant or not. If that test proves that you are one, you become a slave. And so for our young heroes, they know that he is one of the main bad guys of this country. But where in the world is he going to right now when it comes to breaking into a different part of the Citadel? Now, when it comes to Cameron Hodge, he's getting very bored about the idea of watching Wolverine and Archangel go against each other. And so now he's going after a different character, which is going to be Wipeout. But while he's doing that, you have Psylocke on her way over to become a slave. Except we kind of find out that she had lied about the idea of wanting to become one, because now she's able to begin the process of a breakout to free herself, but also the rest of her team. Now, luckily for her, Havoc is technically back on their side, and so he is able to help her out. Now, when it comes to Cameron, he does arrive into the office of David Moreau, hoping to find David, but David's not there. We already know where he's at. He's trying to break into a different part of the Citadel. And so for Cameron, he says, fine, if David's not around, I'll just go ahead and hack into his computer. Now, when it comes to Cameron, he's able to find out that David has a plot to bring down Cameron Hodge. Now, we have to remember that in this entire crossover, it was well established that these two guys do not like each other at all, especially David. He hated Cameron and everything he standed for. Now, when it comes to Wipeout, he walks into the room. And so you have Cameron turn around and he killed off Wipeout for a completely different reason. Now, we jump back over to our heroes who are still prisoners. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, he realized that one of the abilities that Cameron Hodge has is to be able to throw these spikes out of his body. And one of those spikes hit Gambit. And so you have Gambit being able to use the spikes as a way to be a lockpick, to break open the locks. And so now our heroes are free again. Now for Cyclops, he does tell everyone that he realized that Psylocke has a plan. But the question is, what is that plan? Now, when it comes to Havoc, when he arrives into the office of David Moreau, he finds Wipeout. And this is the reason why Cameron Hodge had killed off Wipeout, to make it seem like Havoc was the killer. Because Wolfbane appears and she says, guys, listen, it was him. It was Havoc. He's the one who had killed off Wipeout, because Havoc still pretends that he's part of their group, part of their organization. And so the other guards in the building are like, oh, well, she says she saw you with the dead body. And kind of seems like you did use your abilities to kill him off. The way his body is right now, he does seem a tad bit roasted. So Havoc, we kind of do believe that you are the killer. Now, there is a character I do want to talk about, and that would be Tam Anderson. Now, when it comes to Tam, she's actually the sheriff of the entire magistrate organization. And so because of that, she's in charge of a lot of different soldiers. But when it comes to Tam, she is no longer trying to help Genosha out. She's no longer trying to help out the president, nor trying to help out Cameron Hodge. This is her right now really committing treason and trying to bring him down and anybody else who's on his side, because she realized that that man Cameron is completely insane. And so we see her trying to transport Storm somewhere else. But unfortunately, she is caught by Cameron, who now knows that she is trying to commit treason. Now, luckily for Tam, you have Psylocke appear, and Psylocke is able to grab Storm and also Tam to get the heck out of there. But getting back over to our heroes who are still prisoners, we see them right now trying to break out of their binds. But then you have Tam and Storm walk into the room. Now, when they do, at first, it's our heroes believing that Tam is a bad guy still, that Tam is working with Cameron Hodge. But then you have Tam tell Storm, bring Cyclops over to you. Now, at first, our heroes still believe that Storm is just being a slave following orders. But in reality, she's not, because Storm is no longer under anybody's control. You see, when it came to David, this man had a plan in motion to bring down Cameron Hodge, and he knew that Storm had to be part of that plan. And so you have Storm reveal that technically she's no longer under anyone's control at all, but also she has the ability to restore other people's powers. And so you have Storm give Cyclops a light shock, and just like that, this man had just regained his optic beam, and luckily just in time, because Cameron Hodge just barged right into the room, and Cyclops releases a huge blast hoping to do some damage on Cameron. Now, the next chapter we have to talk about is New Mutants number 97. Now, in the opening pages of this chapter, we actually see Cyclops trying his best to use his optic beam to bring down Cameron Hodge. But here's the problem. Cameron Hodge's new robotic body is just too strong to bring down so easily. And so he is able to actually eat the blast that Cyclops is constantly throwing at him like it's nothing. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, he's trying to do this to give Storm enough time to reactivate the other heroes' powers so that they can all work together to bring down Cameron Hodge. But the problem is, Cameron is not giving them enough time to actually pull it off. But luckily for our heroes, a bomb goes off. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, in our last video, we had talked about the idea that him and Forge had a plan going on that only they knew about. The rest of the team had no idea about this plan, and that plan was a secret bomb. And you see, when it came to Forge, he was knocked out in our last video because he knew that if he got captured, when it comes to Genosha, they would try to read his mind, and if they did, they would find the bomb. And so he basically made sure that he was unconscious to make sure they couldn't read his mind. And so now that bomb has gone off, and that bomb did enough damage to bring down part of the building onto Cameron Hodge. Now, he is not dead, but it does give our heroes enough time to kind of get away and to regroup. Now, I want to jump back over to Richter, Boom Boom, and Jubilee, because remember, they were following David. They were not with the rest of our heroes, but they realized that David was trying to dig a hole into the Citadel, and we kind of find out that he was trying to find the secret lair that belonged to Cameron Hodge. But here's the problem though. You see, when it came to David, he used one of his mutant slaves to help dig into the lair, except when they got into the lair, Forge bomb went off. And so part of the explosion killed off the mutant, but knocked out David. Now, when it comes to our heroes, they grabbed David and went into the lair, and they realized it belonged to Cameron Hodge. Now, the only reason why they knew it belonged to Cameron is because he walked into the room, and he realized that when it came to Forge bomb, they were trying to bring down the computer that's connected to Cameron's mind. But luckily for Cameron, the computer was not completely destroyed, and he leaves his lair. Now, when it comes to Richter, he wakes up David and says, you are going to take me over to Wipeout to give me the chance to get my abilities back, because it's time for me to bring down the entire building. Now, getting back over to our heroes who were prisoners, you do have them go over to Forge, and you have Cyclops being able to say a phrase to actually wake him up. Now, once you have Forge get back up and realize that Storm is okay, you have those two characters make out. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, they got a lot of work to do. First, they gotta find Rain Sinclair, Wolfbane, the other mutant that was turned into a slave. But also, they got to find Cameron Hodge and bring him down. And so our heroes are once again going to split up. Now, when it comes to Wolverine, he does have one concern, and that is Havoc, because none of them know that Havoc is actually good again. They still believe that he is a bad guy. But you have Cyclops say, hey, if you see him, just work with him. Try to help him to realize that he is a good person. And again, they have no idea that he already knows about his past life. Now, I want to jump over to Richter, Boom Boom, and Jubilee, because they're with David, and really, they were able to find Wolfbane. But the problem is, Wolfbane was listening to her last command by Cameron Hodge, and so she goes out of her way to attack Richter. Now, let's not forget that Richter and Rain Sinclair, they were actually in love with one another, and so to see her like this, he freaks out. Now, luckily for Richter, David was there to give her a command to stop, but they realize that she is in full-on slave mode now to Genosha and David. Now, when it comes to Richter, he's very upset, and the reason why? Well, yes, Wolfbane, but also because our heroes find the dead body of Wipeout. And like I said earlier, when it comes to Wipeout, he has the ability to wipe away your powers, but he also has the ability to give your powers back. But with them being dead, our young heroes believe that they no longer have the chance to get their powers back. But luckily for them, Cable and Storm arrive, and you have Storm begin the process to return their abilities. Now, when it comes to Storm, she does have the ability to give Richter and Boom Boom their abilities back. But when it comes to Wolfbane, there is a small problem. Let me explain. So when it comes to the process to turning someone into a slave for Genosha, like I said, you are getting brainwashed to the point where the only thing you believe is that you have to serve the people of Genosha and use your abilities to help their country out. That is it. And the problem is there's no way to reverse that. And so when it comes to Wolfbane, it does seem like she will always be a slave. But here's the catch. When she's in her regular wolf form, she actually has the ability to think for herself and not be a slave. But that's the problem though. She has to stay in her wolf form. If she tries to turn back into a regular human, unfortunately, she cannot think for herself. She'll have the mind of a slave in Genosha. Now, when it comes to Wolfbane, she is down with the idea of getting revenge against Cameron Hodge for what he has done to her and her friends. Now, when it comes to one of the teams that Cyclops have put together, while they were just walking around, they had no idea that they were being watched by Cameron Hodge. Now, when it comes to this team, you have Iceman, Psylocke, Beast, Gambit, Banshee, and Forge. Now, you have a pretty decent team here, and you would think, okay, they should be able to bring down Cameron Hodge. No, that is completely wrong. As soon as this guy fades into the room they're on, he takes them out left and right. It gets to the point where it really comes down to Forge and also Beast to try their best to bring him down. Now, luckily for this team, you have Cameron Hodge leave them alone. And the reason why, because back in his secret lair, Cable's team is getting rid of the computer that is heavily connected to Cameron Hodge. And he needs that computer really bad. And so while while taking down Beast's team, he realized that his computer is being damaged, and so he leaves them alone to go deal with Cable's team. Now, when he does arrive, Cable's team is also struggling to bring down Cameron Hodge. But luckily for our heroes, when it comes to David, he does have a weapon that does some serious damage to Cameron's body. But here's the problem though. Cameron kills off David just like that, and then he disappears. Now, for our heroes, they are very upset about the idea that they weren't able to bring down Cameron Hodge. Now, something else I should also mention is that earlier in this story arc, they found what could be ashes of Warlock, what's left of him. Because remember, he died in the earlier parts of this crossover. So when they find his ashes in some kind of container, they said, listen, we have to take this back and spread these ashes on the grave of Doug Ramsey, aka Cypher, because Cypher and Warlock were like best friends. But you have most of Cable's team continue on to hopefully find Cameron Hodge and to bring him down. Now, when it comes to the final chapter, it does take place in X Factor number 62. Now, most of the pages early on this chapter is really more just Cable's team trying to fight against Cameron Hodge once again. But that's the problem though. Cameron Hodge is just way too strong for our heroes. Now, when it comes to Wolfbane, she does not care at all. Her main goal right now is to just get revenge, even if she has no game plan on how to bring down Cameron Hodge. She does not care because she now has a chance to actually kill off the man who did so much harm to her, but the people she loves as well. Now, when it comes to Cable, he knows that his team is losing. So he says, hey, I need to call in backup right now. And so they call in for Cyclops. Now, I want to jump over to Cyclops because you do have Cyclops telling Archangel to hurry up and go help out Cable's team. But you also have Cyclops telling Jean Grey that he wants her to stay back, like as a way to protect her. Now, he does tell her, hey, listen, I feel like your powers cannot really help us when it comes to battling against Cameron Hodge, but at the same time, I'm trying to protect you. Now, when it comes to Logan, he does get very upset in the fact that it seems like Cyclops is trying to boss her around. And so you have the two characters kind of go back and forth until you have Jean Grey step in and say, listen, Cyclops, I can do what I want to do. And Logan, I don't need you to speak up for me. And then you have both guys just stand there like, man, what a great woman. And then they go on to go help out to battle against Cameron Hodge. Now, I want to say that I'm going to skip over a few pages when it comes to the final chapter of this event because, yes, there is a lot of battles happening in this final chapter. And yes, they're all so great, but I really want to go ahead and focus on the ending of this chapter, the ending of this event, so that we can go ahead and wrap it up. So we do pick up with Cyclops and Havoc being the last two men standing while the rest of the heroes are able to get out of the building. Now, when it comes to Cyclops and Havoc, they let Cameron Hodge have everything. They release all the energy they have inside their body for one big heck of an attack on Cameron Hodge. And really, it's not just one attack. They keep doing it over and over and over again, just breaking away his body piece by piece. But the problem is he does have a healing factor. And on top of that, we cannot forget that he did make a deal with a demon. And so because of that deal, this man truly cannot die. Now you do have Cameron, Cyclops, and also Havoc fall off the top of the building, but Cyclops and Havoc are caught by Jean Grey. Now, when it comes to Cameron, even though he's just ahead, he's still alive because the deal he made with that demon. And he truly believes that his new body can re-heal itself back to what it was in the earlier parts of this event. And so even though he's just ahead, he believes that he should be able to just bounce right back until you have Wolfbane being able to tell Richter, bring down the entire building. Because remember, when it comes to Richter, he has the ability to create seismic waves. And so by doing that, he was able to bring down the entire citadel right on top of Cameron Hodge. Now, we already know that he's not dead, but it will take him a very long time to come back and be a problem for our heroes again down the road. Now, the last 2 pages of this book, it really does wrap everything up for us. Now, yes, you do have our heroes go their separate ways, but when it comes to Anderson, the person in charge of the magistrate, she does tell the other countries around the world that the military has now officially taken over the island, that the government has been overthrown. And so right now they're in charge, and their main goal is to make this country a better place, not just for humans, but also mutants as well. Now, when it comes to Wolfbane, she does not leave with the New Mutants. She stays here to help out, to begin the process of trying to fix this place back up. Now, for Richter, he is heartbroken because now the woman he loves is not going to go back with him home. And so he is sad, but she does ascertain to do one last thing before they leave. She says, "Can you please spread the ashes of Warlock on top of Doug's grave?" Because Cypher, who died back in Fall of the Mutants, they were close friends. And I think Doug will love the idea of Warlock ashes being on top of his grave. And really, you have the New Mutants do that. Now, I kind of want to sit down and quickly explain what was Cameron Hodge's master plan when it came to Genosha. You see, what he was going to do was take over the entire island and turn it into some kind of mega base that would then allow him to hunt down other mutants around the world. Because again, when it came to Cameron Hodge, his whole idea was to get rid of the mutant race. And so he wanted to take over Genosha and turn it into a military island, technically, to go out there to find other mutants and kill them, or possibly turn them into slaves. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.